Okay. Morning, Amit.
Andrew, you right?
Good. How are you?
Very good.
Wonderful. So, hey guys, sorry, just leaning back there. Welcome to the Growth Show. Happy to have you all. Just while I kind of play around with the system here, guys. So for those of you that are new, this is the weekly Growth Show with myself and Amit. Obviously from Nexa. We've been doing this now for well over 18 months, something close to that, right?
Nearly 2 years.
Nearly 2 years. So just while we wait for people to pop in, and I can see there's a few people coming in on LinkedIn as well. We're kind of testing new things this morning, right? I think what happened is that I decided to get sunburnt at the weekend, and that's why I'm incredibly red. And at that point, we said, yeah, let's definitely go live on other platforms, right? Let's do that. Oh, can people hear? I'm not sure if people can hear. Well, I hope you guys can hear us. So this one's misbehaving. We do have backup mics, so I think someone's decided to play with it as well. So welcome to the Growth Show. As we mentioned there, it's a weekly show that we've been doing. Essentially, the format of the show is we kind of talk through some news that's of interest locally to us and kind of internationally. Yep. And then we kind of jump into, I'm already getting abused. That's good. Thank you, guys. Okay, apparently the redness doesn't show on the screen. Fantastic. That's great. Trust me, I'm super red. So you know, we kind of dive into a topic every week. We decided to kind of take a stab at the Metaverse today, right?
Yeah. In about 45 minutes.
So yes.
We're gonna cover the Metaverse.
That's it. Completely. So just while we wait for kind of people to join and people to populate in, guys, across the kind of various channels. How's your week been? All good?
Yeah, good so far. Yeah. Yeah, a bit of a shocker yesterday with the news with the kind of announcement of the tax thing, but
locally,
we'll talk about that.
No, we're jumping that. Yeah.
What about you?
Yes, good. Yeah, very good. Apart from obviously getting a bit of sunburn, it's nice to see events kind of back in, and it was a cracking weekend previously of sport, you know, with the tennis and kind of the golf here locally, and a few different tournaments. So yeah, it's good to be getting back into normal. So look, I think why don't we jump into some of those bits that we've kind of found interesting this week. So do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
No, go for it.
Okay, cool. That's good, because I was hoping you were going to start because I can't bring up my notes. But look, so I think we spoke about the acquisition last week for Microsoft, and kind of they're out there buying up game companies, and it looks now as well that Sony have jumped on a bandwagon. So they've kind of jumped into Bungie, which is a game developer. But interestingly, what I found interesting about this particular thing is that they're the guys that developed Halo. For those gamers in the audience, and obviously we're going to be talking a bit about gaming in the metaverse with things like Fortnite a bit in the show. The incredible thing about that is that Halo is a kind of platform-specific game, so very much driven to Microsoft Xbox. But obviously, a huge purchase again, not quite as big as previous. But I just thought that was interesting to see this movement, and I think it falls in line with what you mentioned last week, where there's potentially some bargains out there at the moment, right? For some of these large organizations like your Apples, your Microsofts that are just sitting on huge piles of cash, there's a bit of a land grab going on, right?
I think so, and I think that's going to continue this year. So I think Nasdaq's down 10 or 11% so far. In January, I think a bit of a pickup yesterday, but I mean, reality is there's a lot of companies that are sitting on 50 or 60% lower valuations than what they were.
That's 3 months ago.
Yeah, 2 months ago. It's been that quick in terms of turnaround. So apparently it was Nasdaq's worst ever January.
Right. Okay.
So but again, I think like you said, there's a lot of companies out there doing very well, very cash rich.
Yeah.
And these guys are going to be looking to mop up companies where that suddenly looked cheap all of a sudden, right?
Yeah. Hoovering it up, like you say. What's caught your eye?
I think the big one in the last week or so was Spotify, right?
Yeah.
I think you're a big kind of Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I really got a lot of time for him.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't.
Yes.
And,
Marmite, right? For English,
exactly.
For English,
I mean, like I can kind of tolerate him. I'll listen to a show every now and then, but I can't do it religiously. No,
I don't. I personally, I'm not the kind of guy that could, it's more about the guest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of our guests is what's kind of got them in
driven
trouble, right?
driven the problem, right?
There's some fake sort of vaccination stories and stuff like that that's come out of it. But it's quite interesting because we've spoken on this show actually about how, you know, people like Facebook, people like Google, you know, they're censoring content, you know, which is kind of anti freedom of speech in some respects. And obviously there's a fine line between sort of fake news and you know, real content. But I think the challenge right now is Spotify, right, are caught up in it and probably never thought they would be caught up in it.
No,
you know, ultimately what they're doing is playing other people's content, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's the challenge, I guess, isn't it? There was always going to be. So, I mean, look, you know, for those, I think everyone pretty much knows Joe Rogan, but he is, you know, and I guess in this part of the world we don't get caught up too much in politics, you know, and how divisive the kind of COVID vaccine, and you know, there's a lot of misinformation about, specifically actually about Joe Rogan, and he's kind of highlighted that. But yeah, it kind of works. One of the main reasons he moved from, say, YouTube, so all of the content used to be, there was things like, you know, he'd get banned for certain things, you know, clips, music, all that kind of stuff. So the idea was that a move to Spotify would just kind of break all of those shackles. But obviously now he's found himself in a situation where there's, you know, censorship.
Like I said, it's a tough one because it's a massive deal, right? It's an $100 million plus deal.
$100 million plus deal.
And so already you've had a few kind of artists go up to Spotify and say, look, you know, it's either him or us. And they've said, well, okay, well,
thanks very much.
Him. And all of a sudden their catalogs have been removed.
They've invested too heavily, and I think in the podcast space. You know, they said that was going to be one of their key drivers of new subscriber acquisition. I mean, I feel like I'm one of the only people I know that actually pays for a subscription for Spotify. I don't know, most people I know have a freebie.
A family account as well.
Yes,
so that's just easier. And
Baz, I think we set ours up in the US at the same time, right? You remember? I think it was New York.
I migrated over to the local one because there's some limitations. But it's interesting.
Right.
But I think we'll move on. But that fine line I think is really difficult for all you know, publishers and companies like Spotify to find, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of plays out. I know they've kind of come back out and said, look, you know, we don't want to censor content. No. It's important for people to get their views across.
Exactly.
And I think it really is. I mean, you know, when Facebook have done it and Google have done it, they've been sort of highly criticized. Twitter, obviously, with Trump.
Yes.
You know, so you know, it's a really kind of difficult position for them. But I think, you know, again, we'll see what they're made of, right?
Yeah. And lastly, I think we touched upon it at the beginning there. Something that, you know, a lot of potentially, you know, our viewers, I think realize Dubai is always, and the Middle East is a kind of tax-free space. We saw the introduction of VAT a couple of years back across the region, and obviously the next step, which was announced yesterday, is now that kind of corporation tax, right? At 9%.
That's right. Yeah. So from 2023, we'll be liable for sort of 9% corporation tax.
Yes.
Is the Metaverse tax-free, Andrew?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
I like that.
Maybe we should operate from there.
We should operate from the Metaverse. We should, tax-free haven.
Or
just start taxing people in Metaverse. It's like those people that sell, you know, space on the moon. It's like, you know, you own this plot on the moon. How do I own that? So possibly Emperor's New Clothes there. We could start with that. No, I think, look, I think for us that operate and work here, we kind of, this is that next step. Potentially now kind of income tax is the next one that kind of rolls through. I think as soon as obviously local authorities started to understand how much revenue was being pulled in from VAT, they kind of got a sniff of what else is out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great place to live. So
yeah, exactly. We're very lucky, you know, and there's obviously other benefits out there. Very clean streets, incredible roads, and we don't pay tax. So happy days. Okay, cool. Let's kind of jump in. I think we've got kind of a nice group of people in here now. I can see on kind of the various platforms that we're pulling from. So thank you for being with us, guys. Just by way of, we do try to make this show interactive. So if you've got any questions, kind of jump on, any comments, there's a chat functionality on the Zoom, and I think on LinkedIn, one of our guys is kind of monitoring that at the moment for us to see if anyone wants to kind of comment on there. Again, this is the first time we're going live on some of these platforms, so we're kind of testing this a bit out this morning. So bear with us. And obviously, if you don't get a chance to watch the whole show, it's put up on the site, put up on YouTube, and also we have a podcast that you can subscribe to. Not quite as big as Joe Rogan's, obviously, but still there. So, Amit, do you want to give us a lift off Metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is something that look, we've touched upon it most weeks, I guess, right? We've been talking about some of, different sort of companies that are already kind of engaging in the metaverse. I think we spoke about Facebook's name change, right? From Facebook to
Meta. Yeah.
And so, and actually, it's a question that I just constantly get asked, right? Whether it's a WhatsApp group, whether it's an event, whether it's on LinkedIn or whatever it is. Yeah. And there's just a lot of people that always come to us for whatever reason because we're in this space, so therefore we know everything.
That's it, know everything. Yeah.
And they're like, right, tell us about the metaverse.
Yeah.
What should we do? Is this something that we need to get involved in?
Yeah.
How do I get started? But I think what's happened more recently is the conversations that we're having are with brands.
Yeah.
And the brands are saying, okay, well, look, is this something that I need to really kind of start thinking about right now? Is it something I need to start thinking about maybe 3 or 4 years from now?
Yeah.
But there's I'd say, I think as kind of awareness and information and knowledge and things like that have grown.
Yeah.
I think now, obviously, that next part is, okay, cool. We understand what it is right now, potentially. Yeah. But for business, what are the benefits, right? Is this something that we need to really kind of pay attention to? And I thought it'd be interesting for us to just dedicate today's show on that very topic.
Yeah.
Right? And I think first and foremost, understanding that, there's still a lot of people who maybe aren't clear on really what the metaverse is. What sort of makes up the metaverse and all the kind of different kind of components related to that.
Sure.
So I thought I'd give us about 40 minutes to kind of run through that.
Nice. That's what we're kind of looking at.
Knowing full well that that's not enough time.
No, totally. Yeah. Well, I think the best thing about our show is that we try to tackle huge topics in 40 minutes.
Yeah. So you either leave here full of knowledge or just highly confused. So,
oh no, hopefully raise some questions and answers at the same time.
But like Andrew did mention, like it's a live show. So if you do have questions, then please feel free to kind of shoot them through. We'll keep an eye on those. Yeah. So Andrew, I'm going to throw it straight to you because that's what I do.
Yeah.
So Andrew, what's the metaverse?
I love it. It's funny because I've been asked this question quite a few times. So I think I talk about what I like to answer is a relatable story, right? As always. So I think my first experience of that space was a couple of years ago, Epic Games with Fortnite. So Fortnite, obviously, that kind of multiplayer game that kind of lives in that space, playable across multiple devices. My son said to me, "Oh, listen, there's a concert, Travis Scott concert that I want to watch." I was like, "Okay, cool. Where is it?" "It's in Fortnite." "Okay, how does that work?" It's a live concert. It's going to be, fully immersive experience, and it just intrigued me. I just fan is Travis Scott as well, but obviously it just intrigued me that there was something in that space.
Just for context, how old is your son?
Now, 8.
So he would have been what?
6. Yeah.
Okay. Which is nuts in itself, right?
Yeah, because there'll be a load of people and parents going, "Why is he playing Fortnite?" It's too. Thanks. Amazing. Well done. Yeah, nice one. Well done. Yeah, good.
But aside from that, the 6-year-old is now saying, "Dad."
Yeah, exactly. I want to watch a concert, and so imagine that. I mean, effectively, that could have potentially been his first concert. So first of all, very cool. There's Travis Scott, but a virtual concert. And I think what that kind of catch-all umbrella of the metaverse is it's that online space, right? However it presents itself, and that online space can be fully immersive by way of headset, by kind of the movie Ready Player One, where you got kind of you're not to that stage, but you kind of got a headset on, you've got pressure pads in gloves, and you've got other things like this, obviously that have that fully immersive experience. Or back then, 2 years ago, it was watching a concert. You were interactive as a gamer. You were there. You could jump around. Travis Scott was like 1,000 foot tall. Then he was super small. Then there was color changes, but you were listening to the music, and obviously it was a fully immersive experience, right? Obviously, from an entertainment perspective, I think that possibly there's almost feels like 2 areas where people have initially been introduced to it through gaming and entertainment, or ultimately potentially through some kind of high-end work. So, Microsoft guys have been working closely in the medical field to do, remote training, and so practical application of metaverse as well, not the kind of fun stuff, but building a virtual space that allows you to, do things in that virtual space, right? So that's the overlap, right? And obviously, I mean, Travis Scott can't be a 1,000 foot tall in a conference in a regular concert that you and I would go and watch, right?
But I mean, that concert in itself was nuts because it was 12 million people tuned in, right?
Yes. Yeah. Watched.
So 12 million people watched it.
Yeah.
And you said they were selling merchandise.
Yeah. So on the back of it, so that, there's a real bleed into offline as well, or the real world, right? In the sense that there was merchandise associated to it, specifically around the concert. So you could either, look at buying the virtual merchandise. There was skins and things like this that you get at the time as well. So it was monetized. This wasn't, it was a free concert. But if you wanted to kind of purchase some of the other material that they were released at the same time, you could buy in the real world. Okay. So you could buy dolls, you could buy, all this kind of stuff.
It's really interesting. I think I've heard a couple of people talk about, there's in terms of metaverses. There's not just one metaverse, right? So there's multiple metaverses.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what we say.
Yeah, I'd say that it's any kind of virtual space, right? So even if you think, for those of you that are kind of gamers, when you go into PlayStation, originally on PlayStation, Xbox, you used to be able to go in and talk to other people. There's online gaming, so you have the ability to, meet in that virtual space, right? It's just that obviously there's other reasons why people are going into that virtual space now. So some people are working in that virtual space, right, in a virtual office. So there's obviously an organization that just has virtual offices. So you can go into a virtual office in a virtual space and work in a virtual space. It could be concerts, it could be shops, and we'll kind of dig into that a bit more. But it's not at the moment that it's it's almost like the internet. You remember, like, obviously you and I don't remember this, but someone told me, because we're too young, but someone told me, obviously there was a time when internet was the super information highway, right? And you used to get asked, what was the internet, right? What is that, right? And that's a very real question in this part of the world, right? The internet wasn't around 20 years ago here, right? Simple as that, it just wasn't here. So I think similar question, what is the internet? What is the metaverse, right? It's a bit of a catch-all, and then it kind of lives in that virtual world, right? Effectively.
And you've got, at the moment, I think, just guys, we're going to just keep really kind of laying the foundations for this a little bit.
Yeah.
But, you've got people like Facebook who are already kind of actively involved in this, right?
Yeah.
And so Facebook have got their own metaverse.
Yes.
Right. So that's like a centralized metaverse.
That's right. And they have full-time employees that live in the metaverse.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So their job is to be in there, live, operate. Yeah. We touched upon this. We touched upon this last week a little bit, but there was a story of a woman that had crippling anxiety and agoraphobia, right? And the metaverse for her has been a space that she's just been able to live and breathe and operate, hold down a job, right, that she couldn't do in real life. Yeah. And obviously other people with kind of disabilities, this is a phenomenal space for them as well, just aside from practical application. But yeah, so Facebook have their kind of metaverse at the moment, and they're building a lot out in that, right? So building out currency, kind of crypto, NFT. I mean, it's yeah.
But there's at the moment it's all game focused for Facebook, right? In terms of
not so much game, but
Oculus, right?
Yeah, but community driven activity. Oh, really? Okay. So his idea, if you remember that creepy video that he did when he had like barbecue sauce as a thing on his shelf, if you remember, it's a bit weird. He was talking about very much community based environment. So the next step of interacting with people is friendships and family gatherings could be in that metaverse. Okay. So you could have virtual family gatherings, virtual parties, or work and collaborate with each other, like we would collaborate with each other.
I think there was a Zuckerberg interview a few months back after they announced Meta, and he was talking about basically how it's still going to be very focused around a headset for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
I was talking about this 3 to 5 year window.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the interesting parts of this, because obviously they invested in Oculus.
That's right.
Whatever, 7-8 years
ago.
Yeah,
right? Something like that. Yeah.
Which I think at the time everyone was like, "Why have they just bought that?" They just don't get it. But apparently, this is what they've been developing in the background for the last 7 years, right? So again, this has been something that isn't new. That's just happened all of a sudden. There's been work. It's like you said, you went to a concert, a couple of years back. So, but I think one of the things at the moment is in his metaverse, it is very kind of device specific in terms of the headset and stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think
to be more of an immersive experience.
Yeah.
And you and I have worn those headsets. It's quite frightening.
Yeah.
How, I mean, I think your first exposure, from what I remember, was at South by, and you had the
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones,
yes.
And there was the edge of the cliff, and right.
That was it's a long time ago.
Yeah,
actually, but it was exactly that, where
we're
basically everyone knows they're on a flat platform.
Exactly.
But all of a sudden they're in this kind of immersive world. And, and there's a cliff right there, and you see people literally panicking. I mean, it was that real.
Yeah.
And obviously I was just on the side, like videoing these idiots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's also a good point, because I think a lot of us have seen, I don't know, like on our desktops or on our laptops or whatever, right? Or what it kind of looks like in the metaverse.
Yeah.
But it's not that at all, because I think once you've got the headsets on, all of that just looks very different, right? It just, I mean, and I think that's because at the moment it feels like, I don't know, a computer game from the 90s, right? At the moment, in terms of when you're looking at it just from a kind of laptop or something. But the second, like I said, you put those devices on, the whole thing is just very different.
And you've got, and bear in mind, I mean, there's a whole load of accessories associated to the headset. So you have the headset, you have the, kind of what do you call it? The this is a completely, what's it called? A running pad. When you're running on a treadmill. Yeah. See. No, everyone knows I don't know what treadmill is. But basically they've got kind of multi-directional treadmills that allow you to run and walk in different directions, so you can move around. You can have pressure points, so if you kind of take a hit, you can have smell, so they can release certain smells. I mean, there was a kind of a crazy experience here, like a Ghostbusters experience, and that was nuts. Like when you were like toasting Mr. Stay Puft, you could smell burning marshmallows, and it blew you away. Like you're not Peter Venkman, you're not kind of powering, kind of going after Zool, but you can smell marshmallows, you can see like down there, so it's very, very immersive.
I think it's definitely worth looking at that. The other side, we spoke about the centralized metaverse, right? So your Facebooks and whichever ones, but I think the ones that have gained much bigger traction so far are the decentralized ones, right?
Yep.
So this is some examples of those, Andrew, and what kind of that decentralized part looks like.
I guess one of the biggest ones is Sandbox.
Okay.
Right. Sandbox is the one that probably most people have heard of. There's Earth 2. There's we can kind of list out a whole, kind of bunch of different spaces, as they were.
Yeah. But these are all individual metaverses.
Yeah. So you at the moment they're not connected.
Yeah.
So you can live and operate and play and work and in that space. Sandbox, the reason most likely that Sandbox is, probably phenomenal backing at the moment, but also collaboration with kind of 165 known brands.
Right.
So, things like Adidas, Nike, Snoop Dogg, have kind of purchased land in that space. You and I spoke about the fact that there was a kid in the States earning like $100,000 who was virtually servicing cars, and things like this. We should actually, before we get a lot deeper, we should, really go back to the point that like we just mentioned, my son, his first experience of a concert was virtual. If you look at kind of our kids and younger kids, this is pretty normal to operate in this space. They have their friends in there. They you know, it's a social gathering, right? So, you know, there may be a lot of people that obviously have video games and stuff like this, but obviously from a social perspective, it's a social life, right? So there's a social element attached to this. There's purchasing of virtual products. So, you know, the concept of perhaps, you know, some people like
NFTs.
Yeah, like NFTs, but how can you own something that's virtual? So how can you even own that virtual space? Who are you purchasing it from? Who are you buying it from? What's the value attached to it? And I guess, look, the interesting part of that is the value of that is what people are willing to pay.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely. And I think this is where it gets interesting, because I think the fact that you can, in a metaverse, own a piece of land,
build on it,
and then on that land, build on that land, which needs virtual materials and things like that, right? You can't just kind of go out there and draw a house and then that's yours, right? And then all of these are ultimately NFTs, and all of this is all stored in the blockchain, right? And this is I think where it gets interesting, because I think we've all heard about blockchain, you know, crypto, NFTs, but the metaverse is actually what brings it all together, right? And really, you know, because obviously there's different uses for blockchain and stuff like that. Not discounting that.
No.
But if you wanted to kind of really understand how all of these really kind of integrate, I think the metaverse is a really good example for that, right? Because it provides that sort of, you know, virtual platform where all of this activity can be done. You're purchasing these NFTs through Ethereum or other crypto, and all of those trades and logs are stored securely in the blockchain. And I think that was really interesting. So I didn't tell you this earlier, but I was playing around with this on the weekend. So
Sandbox?
No, well, no, not that. I haven't got that far yet.
Oh,
right. But I went and I went and bought some NFTs on OpenSea.
Got to be careful now, yeah. And 90% of them are fake.
Yeah.
Right, just let you know. Yeah.
So that was quite interesting, right? So I bought a couple of pictures.
Okay. No Bored Apes. You didn't decide to drop like 100K on it.
No apes. No.
Right,
so this was very kind of experimental. So it was like
apes with two Bs.
Yeah. Point. Actually, it was a couple of Rolex pictures.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Which are quite cool. And then it was basically 0.1 Ethereum per NFT. Okay.
What was that for in real money for people to understand?
So it's this is where, like I said, you know, it's only when you start really playing around with this stuff that you start to really kind of, I don't know, for me at least, when I can start to kind of feel it, I start to get it. So at that point, I loaded up my Trust wallet, bought the Ethereum, went into OpenSea, bought a couple of NFTs, and at that point, Ethereum was at its lowest. So it must have been, it was like, oh, it's not at its lowest, but it was low.
Yeah, it's only started creeping back last couple of days.
Given the context of the last month or so. So 0.1 Ethereum at that point was about $220. Right? So I was like, okay, so a couple of those. And then the next thing is Ethereum starts going up. So then ultimately, what I've just invested in starts going up. So I was like thinking, well, this is like buying gold.
Yes. Okay.
Or any other kind of asset.
Yeah, it's an asset. Yeah.
You know,
that's
so,
right.
So basically,
and it's yours. You own it.
Right. So yeah, exactly. Right. So I bought. It's like walking into a gold ticket to buying a bar of gold.
Yeah.
And then obviously that's linked to you know, the price of gold.
Yeah.
But if your currency is getting stronger in the meantime.
Yeah.
And your gold price is increasing.
Assets is
actually you've got double growth in your assets, right? And that was the thing. For whatever reason, I'm just dumb. I think I just didn't get it, right?
Right.
And then as soon as I bought the NFT, I got it. I was like, oh, that's interesting, because Ethereum now went up like 12% that day. So I'm like, well, okay. Even if my asset of 0.1, Ethereum doesn't, you know, that picture doesn't increase. Well, I've still kind of potentially gained 12% if I sell it for the same price.
Yes.
But then I started getting offers.
Right.
Which was quite cool.
Okay.
So then I started to get offer of like 1.5 Ethereum for my.
Right. Yeah. And
I'm like, hold on, it's just now 50% on top of my 12%. And I was like, this is kind of addictive. Really interesting. Especially when my stock portfolio is going in the other direction.
Exactly,
All of a sudden it's like, right, I'm going to buy every NFT. But I just felt it was super interesting, and the fact that it was on the blockchain and all of these things, and you can now start to kind of track every part of it. But it was a very cool experiment in the sense of, you know.
Yeah, and I think at that point, again, you're looking at this as, I mean, obviously you're testing and you're playing, but you're seeing it as an asset. You know, the next conversion piece of that is, what do you do with that NFT?
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is what's interesting. So if you see some of the people, for example, the most famous NFTs, probably Bored Ape, you know, what have they done? Well, they've you know, got a purpose-built plasma frame where they project the Bored Ape, right? Like you would any other art.
Okay.
Or some people have it on their watch,
Right.
their Apple Watch. So actually your Apple Watch is $300, but no, it's $100,000 because I've got a Bored Ape on here, right? And that's mine. So I think it's interesting how, you know, in that space, and again, back to digital ownership and, you know, how this works, you know, at the end of the day, obviously, like you said, it's down to what people pay and how much they are willing to pay for this. But I think what's interesting in the NFT space from a business perspective is how, you know, it's the transformation of that asset to give you access to something. So it's not just ownership of a particular asset, it's then access to certain things. So, I mean, look, we've kind of spoke about Gary Vee in the past, and you know, he's a bit Marmite as well, right? You either kind of love what he does or you're not overly keen on what he does. But he's operating hard and fast in the NFT space, and he's opening up an NFT restaurant, right, where you gain access through NFTs, yeah? Famously did V Friends, which is his NFT space. But, you know, the practical application where you have things like access to concerts, access to, you know, certain environments, all of these things based on ownership of something, right? Because I think you and I spoke about, you know, your Everton like season ticket. How does that work at the moment? Like I was asking you, is it electronic? Is it digital? Is it
Terrible.
Yeah, terrible. Just that being right. Okay, but I mean, like the practicality of it, right? Not so much being an Everton fan, but like, you know, the practicality of having that and then using it. And then this is, I think, what's interesting, because I think what should be really kind of championed is this isn't kid stuff, you know, and I think this is the missed opportunity. I think you mentioned at the beginning there, like, why do you need to know about it? I think because it's not kid stuff, right? There will be more and more practical uses of this space, right?
And you know, I was referring back to, I think it was a Gary Vee interview with Zuck, and he was saying that this is 5 years. We're not, but like in 5 years, like, you know, the way he was actually explaining it is like, me and you wouldn't need to come into our office, into the studio to do this show every week. We would have exactly the same setup, but in a metaverse, and broadcasting out to whoever was tuning in, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing. But I think what kind of really made it, I don't know, it was a bit eye-opening from my perspective is he kept, like I said, kept talking about a 3 to 5 year window. That this is here, it's happening. And if you're a brand that doesn't potentially take advantage of this, you know, there's you know, you may miss out on the internet, right? Again, you know, this is like that first mover advantage on the internet was so huge for so many businesses. Well, this is potentially that next phase of, okay, what's the first mover advantage of being in the metaverse? And like I said, there's all these brands that are getting on board and taking advantage of it. Right?
Yeah, we don't want to be Blockbuster, right?
No, no. But I think there's I think one of the other things, just to sort of contextualize it, like what you said, you know, this isn't for kids. You've got some serious companies who are in this space and investing in billions, right? Exactly. So obviously we mentioned like Facebook or Meta now, but they're investing about $10 billion a year now, just into this, right? Into research and development and stuff like that of the metaverse. But you've got Microsoft there, you've got Google that are involved, Apple's involved, and all of them are ultimately just making it really easy for people to kind of develop things that go onto the metaverse, right? Yeah. From a kind of, you know, virtual reality perspective, but also from an augmented reality perspective in terms of, you know, how these things sort of tie in together. And I think, you know, that's something to kind of definitely take on note, because, you know, these aren't just new kind of companies like, you know, Facebook 15 years ago, whatever it was. These are serious players investing billions and billions of dollars into this, and the only way they're going to do that, the only reason they're going to do that, is for a return.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And to obviously secure their space in
Their
what
space.
they strongly believe is
Yeah.
the next big thing. Right? And I think that's why I think it's really important for.
Yeah, and there's a lot to play at the moment, like because we mentioned at the top there, like someone in Sandbox, Snoop Dogg's in Sandbox, the price of any kind of land close to him is through the roof.
So what's he got in Sandbox?
He's got, I think he's got a shop,
A studio, I think.
Right.
it's just like, yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at it, to be honest with you, recently. But he was one of the first artists to kind of jump in there and say, and he bought a pretty decent kind of plot. And again, there's hot and cold areas in there, right? So, just like famous streets, famous towns, famous things like this, I think that's kind of going to be in that space.
Yeah.
I think that one thing we haven't spoken about, actually, which is quite interesting, is, Microsoft have been in this game, you could say, for a while with Minecraft. Because Minecraft is a kind of metaverse as well, right? And then that's why it's not child's play. To do certain things within Minecraft, you have to mine, rock, and then you have to smelt it to make, bronze. There's a whole host of different activities associated to that. So I think the interesting thing is that people spend vast amounts of time doing virtual things, which still blows me away, right? Look at the Farmville and stuff like that, where people are tendering their farm, and I think the difference is now that in this space there's an opportunity to potentially monetize that work, right? Whereas previously it was just for fun, right? You look how many gaming hours you did. You built this phenomenal universe, in there. I mean, I read recently there's 3 guys, and their business is building worlds in Minecraft. That's what they do. Okay. Like, I mean, it's so there's a whole host of businesses now that don't exist today that ultimately would exist, in the future. And I think I think it all boils down in the end to accessibility. I think, so you mentioned there about Oculus and things like this. A lot of the time, we've ignored certain things until like Apple put it on their phone. Things that have been around for years. As soon as it starts to kind of populate in the masses. And the interesting about Sandbox is its ability to kind of jump on and get involved. I think the NFT space is still a bit tricky. Like you actually mentioned Trust Wallet. What's a Trust Wallet? How do I do that? How do I, so there's still, and also there's a lot of misinformation. So for example, if you Googled buying an NFT now, you'd probably be presented with 150,000 plus videos, right? Yeah. Buy my course, do this kind of stuff, right?
You're 100% right. There's obviously people trying to monetize the process,
yes,
right?
Process. Yeah.
This is, and that's what I found. But actually, I was also blown away by how easy it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I kind of mentioned, okay, you
yeah.
load up the wallet.
Yeah.
It was basically taking money out of an ATM machine.
Yeah.
Seeing something you like.
Yeah.
And then paying for it through my wallet, right?
Yeah.
And the rest of it was done. Right? You just, there's a couple of security bits in there, but once that was done, the whole process was literally maybe less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's obviously going to get easier and easier over time.
Yeah, there's a couple of apps. There's a couple of apps that have kind of simplified this process as well. I think Vivo is one. Vive, VEVE. That's an application that have kind of partnered with Marvel for some of theirs, kind of collectibles, let's say. I think the thing is, I kind of spoken about this in the past to people when I've explained how some of these collectibles work. I mean, it's just like, when you're in the Walt Disney shop or the Warner Brothers shop and you can buy, the original cell for Fantasia, for example, right? That the artist, kind of created. Now you can do that, but digitally, right? You can take ownership of some of that digital activity. I think it gets a bit weird when they're trying to do, kind of digitize everything. But I think that goes back to more of the gimmick stuff versus practical application,
Cool. So I think we've got about 20 minutes. So I really want to focus on the opportunities for brands, right? So I think we've, kind of laid some foundation in terms of what Metaverse is.
Yeah.
how you can kind of get on there and
Yeah.
kind of the types of metaverses that sort of are out there. But I think like I said, from a kind of commercial opportunity for brands rather than sort of individuals. I mean, let's touch on that. And I think you mentioned a couple of these. So, you know, for example, retail stores and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Brands are already doing this, right?
Yeah, in that B2C space, brands are, you know, they're actively involved. So, you know, Adidas, Nike have kind of minted certain NFTs, sold out straight away. You've now got a lot of the new movies that are being launched in the Marvel and DC space, along with the trailers and merchandise, are also minting certain NFTs, right? Collectibles associated to the overall kind of promotion of that area. Of the movie. You know, so I think usually, obviously, what we see that B2C space is usually first mover, because they want to kind of, you know, create some buzz, some excitement, some element. They want to be different. The B2B application side usually kind of, you know, not as sexy, right? So it's kind of not at the forefront, but still kind of being worked on, right? As I said, I mean, you know, in that medical field, there is, you know, virtual kind of operations that are going on at the moment, right? In the US and stuff, where a surgeon will be in one room and, you know, the patient is another, connected to a, you know, metaverse through the robot and, right? So I think there's, that's, but it's still early days, right? I think the thing is, it's almost like, you know, let's say a new social platform comes on, or a new way to promote your business or engage with your customers presents itself. You know, there's always that phase of, well, how can I use this to my best advantage, right? And I think we're kind of in that phase at the moment, right? Yeah. Very much feels like that. A lot of questions about it. There's been some success, mainly around NFTs, but, you know, how else can we explore the opportunity, right, in that space?
So let's go back to just some of the retail stores. So you said about Nike and Adidas, right?
Yeah.
So what are they doing specifically?
I mean, there's a lot of focus on NFTs, where they're selling certain NFTs and collabs. So Nike and Adidas famously do like collaborations with artists and collaborations, and they're doing collabs with the NFT, like Bored Ape and everything. As far as the collabs, there's now, you know, a space where they're looking at exploring virtual clothing, virtual accessories, that you can use in your virtual space, right? So just like you would buy trainers and you know, clothing, there's that, looking at it virtually. I think that has a bigger implication at the moment for the fashion industry, just mainly around the fact of fast fashion and the impact on the environment at the moment, and how, yes, there's fast fashion, you know, and then there's kids that are, you know, kind of renting clothes and changing their clothes and reselling them. I think that's why virtual clothing, virtual accessories, things like this are interesting, right?
I think so. Look, I think whenever you're talking about that virtual space, I think it becomes even more interesting, because especially if you're a retailer, the fashion retailer is a great example. Because potentially what you could do is use the metaverse almost to understand what demand will be in the real world, right? You know, so what kind of items are people interested in? What are they kind of buying? You know, or trading, or whatever it is. And then that could potentially even drive, you know, production, right? And it feels much easier to do it in a virtual space than it would be there. And I'm sure it's not that easy, but the point is, you know, it's got to be potentially a lot cheaper than, you know, than basically going out to mass production.
Yeah, everyone loves that personalization. So if you look at, you know, the gaming space, obviously, is the one that we lean into, because this is very
familiar, but there's a whole lot of skins in it.
Right.
You know, people will spend, let's say, you know, $3 to $10 on an outfit, right? Now, no one's going to see that in the real world, but you know, and they're limited releases, so it's not just a case of it's, you know, it's on the shelf and it's on the peg and it'll be on the peg for a month. No, there's limited releases for a day. So you've got to, you know, again, you know, by way you saying there, you can
determine, fashion. You can actually drive it, right? Because you can see the excitement associated to a limited release, for example, right? And what that gains, and that may be, because I think it's such a controllable environment. That's the other thing as well. It may be questions people may be asking, well, why don't they just produce 2,000 of them, right? Because they can, because it's virtual.
Yeah.
So it's not like they've got to open another factory to increase production, right? So I think that's interesting. So if you look at, for example, now globally across the world, we're suffering from supply chain problems, right? For physical products. So things like cars and whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, right? What's interesting in our metaverse, no one's suffering from a supply chain at the moment. Like if I want to go and get a car and I want to kind of, I want to spend my money elsewhere, I can, right? I think that's interesting.
Do you think the first step for brands is to go hybrid then? So rather than just focus on, right, we're a real world brand with real products, and now we're in the metaverse and we're selling these NFTs essentially for these products. Does it make sense then for brands to almost think of it as, okay, well, actually, look, if you're now buying this, you also get this, and that could work both ways, right? So, for brands, let's say, for example, Nike, right? They've got physical stores and they've got distributors and all that kind of stuff. Maybe one of their advantages is saying, hey, buy direct from a Nike store and also get, a unique NFT for that same product that you've bought, right?
Yeah.
Or vice versa, where you go into a metaverse and actually buy something, and that brand then physically sends you.
Allows you
doesn't have to be the same products, but it just could be anything, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that, like if because there's two ways to it, and I think when brands kind of jump on board stuff like this early, firstly it's brave, and the second kind of reason for them doing it is almost to extend the longevity of their brand.
Yeah.
Right, because
new technology. Got to be relatable.
Yeah. Well, new technology, and it's young people and things like that, right? That's a potential audience for the next 20 years.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the investment. Yeah.
Right. And so therefore, what you're doing is now tapping into your son, right? And saying that, okay, right, here's an 8-year-old, and literally, if we can get him to understand how cool we are as a brand, then that's ingrained in his mind forever, right? And I think this is really, I think, where it starts to get quite.
I think as
long
as
smart and intelligent.
I think as long as they treat it as an opportunity versus a commodity. So I think there's been, for example, in the retail space, brands that we've spoken to in the past that will say, we treat our e-commerce store as another store, right? It's very short-sighted. It's very blinkered in its approach. It needs to be part of the portfolio, but treated independently, and there's other opportunities to present themselves in the e-commerce space.
Right.
So I think that if the same approach is applied to the metaverse, where it's like it's not just another store, it's virtual, it's store, we can drive e-commerce, we can do this, we can do that. No, you've got to, I think, where brands have really been able to embrace is through the community. So it's one thing that we haven't mentioned, but what's huge in the metaverse space is Discord, like the messaging platform. Again, very popular in gaming circles, but every single drop, every single metaverse, every single NFT has Discord server, right? It has a Discord channel that you kind of go into and you live, and again, that builds back to that community piece. So it's not just a case of, okay, let's fire up this, let's look at the products. We need to ultimately understand how to communicate to your audience as well, right? And it's not a case of, let's say, let's launch a Facebook campaign and tell everyone about this. Actually, people are operating in a different space now. So a lot of people live and breathe in that Discord community and get all of their information, their news, their, the latest drops, anything the case may be, it's that space. So I think, and therein lies the challenge, right? So it's not just saying, okay, I want to jump into the metaverse. There's a whole host of other strings attached to this, right? That you need to be mindful of, considerate. Otherwise, you're going to pour a load of money into something and just fail at it, right? So I think that's the thing. It's not just, okay, let's jump into this and do this. It's kind of, and also like, how do you create longevity on the back of it? So I think where the practical application of some of the NFTs and some of the metaverse That's where the interest should lie, not, I'd say, almost like the buzz, right? And look, I think the thing is, so what will happen is, now that you know, purchase and you're in OpenSea, because of the way social networks work on their algorithm, you're going to see more and more of this, right? NFTs and data and crypto. You're going to see a whole host of that, right, across your social channels, and then you're going to start wondering to yourself, well, why aren't other people talking about this, right? And it's basically because then they're not involved in that. So that's the other thing to consider. So as much as we're excited, and obviously we've got a great audience today, thank you for staying with us, guys. You know, there's a whole host of people that are like, no, you're good, right? I've got too much, I'm going to tap out on that. You know, so then how do you kind of speak to those people, and do you need to? No, not necessarily, right? You know, we say it all the time, well, how do I get this person's attention? Well, actually you can't. So, you know, don't bother. Right. So, you know, from that side,
No, absolutely. I think we spoke about sort of, you know, this isn't for kids and stuff like that. This is very much for kind of adults and sort of serious.
Perhaps
people.
It's just about just trying to recapture our youth.
I think the most interesting brand I think I've seen who really kind of engaged in this so far is Sotheby's.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, you know, they're kind of using art and sort of creating NFTs and you know, building a space within a metaverse on that. So again, you know, it's just, you know, it's mad. I kind of, when I started to really kind of dig deeper into this, and there's so much talk at the moment about, you know, people living on Mars in the future and all this kind of stuff, right? This is basically exactly this in the virtual world, right? Where there's whole new universes out there. You go in, you kind of, you know, select your land, you pay for it, you start building on it, and you build this whole sort of coexistence. And the more people that go onto it, it will just turn into a busy city or a busy country or whatever it is, right? But I think this is really I think what makes it quite interesting. And I think, like what you said, there's a lot of people out there who maybe find comfort and relaxation in this universe compared to the one they currently kind of, you know, are physically in. Right? You know, because, you know, we've all kind of been there. I mean, Christ, you know, even in the early days of playing Football Manager, and you'll be like, "Well, you're doing this for 15 hours."
Exactly.
Like, you're just so kind of immersed. But you just. But
you come off and play Sabittia at some point and then go back on.
I mean, but that's, you know, it's very easy to get lost in that world at this point, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think the more you kind of invest time in it, and I see it with my kids with Roblox and.
Yeah, Roblox. That's one we haven't even spoken about.
Right.
Actually, yeah.
And so they're already in it, right? And especially, like, you know, for guys like us, we're just going to kind of get older and stuff. But these guys are kind of living it right now. Yeah. You know, and so for them, this is going to be very natural. And I think that's where, you know, irrespective of the kind of business you are, the type of brand that you have, you know, it's definitely something to think about, because, you know, if you do target, say, millennials and you know, the Gen Zs and all these guys, then I don't think you've got a choice. You've got to start really looking at this right now. But the point is that at some point, in the same way that, you know, our parents are on Facebook religiously, everyone will evolve, and they didn't jump on it when we did, but they came onto it, and then now this is what they do. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so I think the way that this accelerates, and if we just look at all of these different sort of case studies in terms of, you know, businesses like Facebook and the social platforms and stuff like that, the volume and, you know, the millions and billions of people that are now on these platforms and how quickly that accelerates is really what makes it interesting. And again, I think one example is just how long did it take Facebook to get to the same 2 billion users? How long did it take TikTok, for example?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about you know, huge kind of differences in time, and I think potentially this is what can happen here, right? When it happens, when it accelerates, people are going to be on there, and I think for your brand to kind of be visible or relevant, especially if you want to stay, you know, cool and you know, desirable and stuff like that. I think you know, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
A lot there.
Look, I think the thing is that even, you know, Microsoft coming out and talking about maybe an extension, as you said, about an extension of their Office 365 environment. I mean, it would be interesting to see now you know,
connected in that kind of virtual world from a meeting perspective. We talk about it a lot, Zoom, Teams, etc. I wonder how open people would be to, not be on camera, right? And have a kind of a virtual, person that represents them in that meeting room. And I don't know, one thing I really miss about, non-physical meetings, crazily, is very old school, and it's whiteboards. So if there was a space that, even we could collaborate with like our international teams, in kind of have those conversations, and you could draw on a whiteboard virtually and people can see, that'd be very cool.
There's examples of that already.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I've seen it in Facebook, right, where it's kind of around the table and stuff.
Yeah. They're basically about workplace.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean that Facebook Workplace. I mean that's again, that was there. That's interesting because I think when that first came out, it was like, why is Facebook getting involved in the work stuff? Like, Facebook is your friends and stuff like that. Like, why would you want to connect with your work colleagues on Facebook? But obviously, there was a wider picture that they were looking at. But stuff like that, that's a real practical application. Or it might be, for example, in education for STEM, when you are virtually building. Like a bridge or a chemistry set or whatever the case may be, right? Potentially even to the point where you can see volatile chemicals in a chemistry class, right? I mean, I know when I was growing up, we had a nut job Scottish guy called Mr. Innes who basically nearly burnt down the school about 5 times, right? The guy was a nut job, but we loved him because he was a chemist and he used to create fire and fire. He goes, let's learn about fireworks, and learning about them was making them, right? Now, obviously that wouldn't be allowed now, right? But having a virtual chemistry class, again, is like very cool, right? I mean, now it's all elephant toothpaste, right? Which is just fun, but actually seeing sparks with like sodium and magnesium and things like that is a lot more exciting. But I think that's where, if you sit back, even if you grab a coffee and think, well, okay, yeah, well, actually, no, that could work. That could work virtually. That could work virtually. And it's just, it's unbound, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew's 57 minutes past.
Look at
that. So yeah, look, I think I've enjoyed today. I think we've covered quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, from our side, I think it's like, if you do have any kind of questions that are very specific to the metaverse, perhaps getting started, I think there's a couple of blog articles there that we need to potentially write to kind of get people started.
to help people understand it and be like a single source of truth, as it were, because there's a lot of misinformation out there as well at the moment.
Yeah. So, but if you do have specific questions, send them through, and catch us every week, right? So we've been, like I said, we've been doing this for just under a couple of years now. Same sort of time slot every week, so it's sort of 10 o'clock UAE time. We do constantly apologize to our UK viewers, because we know there's a few of them who kind of have to get up earlier and earlier, but we do appreciate it as well. Guys, if you do miss our show, we have a podcast as well, again, Digital Growth Show, and you can find all the information on our website, so digitalnexus.com.
Perfect, good stuff. Thanks, Amit. Looking forward to next week, guys. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening and watching. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks,
Amit. Cheers. Bye, guys.